Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to the Falcoholic Lives Emergency Show edition. We are going to be breaking down I guess maybe surprising in that the news dropped late last night, but not really surprising in that we kind of knew that it was coming. News that the Falcons have moved on from Dan Quinn, and then the probably somewhat surprising news that the Falcons also elected to move on from general manager Thomas Dimitroff mid-season. This was obviously a hot button topic on the show. We've been talking about it for weeks. We've talked about it maybe for over a year at this point. I believe it was almost a year ago at this point that the Falcons lost that game to the Texans where they gave up over 50 points. That was, for me, the day that I knew that we had to change things, and here we are a year later, and it has finally happened. I don't feel great about that, obviously, but yeah, it is what it is. So this is obviously big news for the Falcons going forward and for the rest of the season. We're going to be talking about Raheem Morris being named the interim head coach, and we're going to get to some of your questions as well. But to kick things off, first I want to welcome in my guests joining us. First of all, you guys recognize him in his sultry voice from the Falcoholic podcast. David Sultry, yes. Dulcet tones, Yeah. David Walker, DW, at Falcoholic DW on Twitter. How are you doing today?
I'm just mad Dirk Cutter's still around.
Yeah. Oh, we'll get to that too. It's not about what we lost. It's about what's been left behind. And we still have Dirk Cutter, unfortunately. So, also with us, Eric Robinson, at _Eric_Robinson. Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I just got back from helping Dan Quinn pack his boxes.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
So we just decided to take a little break mid-afternoon.
Yeah, so yeah. You needed your help to move a couch,
Yeah. We needed some help, so we just kind of chuck it in the truck, and I told him, you can't, you got to get going, man. You got to get out of here.
Yep. All right, so obviously a lot of takes. Those of us that were on the post-game show got the news that Dan Quinn was leaving, so I've had a little bit of chance to talk about it before it was official. So I'll let you guys take the first crack at it here. Eric, let's start with Dan Quinn, because this was the most expected one, and we'll kind of kick it off with that. I think you were basically on board with this basically from last year, but what are your thoughts on the decision to move on from Quinn now at 0-5 here in 2020?
Well, first and foremost, yeah, it's about a year too late. It should have happened last year, but Arthur Blank is so forgiving, and I don't think Arthur Blank has one enemy in life. For some reason, he just doesn't like to upset people. But yes, it's about a year too late. But it happened. It needed to happen for the very few that are out there that believes Dan Quinn should have stayed on board. I have no idea what they're watching on Sundays, but the team needed to make this move.
Yeah.
And I'm a little proud of Arthur Blank because he did it in season, and all of us amongst the Falcoholics, we thought it was either going to be a bye-week firing or off-season firing. But I think all of us collectively said, you need to do it now. Just do it and get it over with. And he did. He didn't even allow, Dan Quinn to leave the facility and drive back home to his family. He just told him, hey, get the hell out of here. So, I mean, it's fine with me. But it needed to happen, definitely.
Yeah. It was past due, honestly, and we know Blank is a very patient owner, and that, yeah, he is. Sometimes, and apparently to a fault with this coaching staff, but it was past time, and it's good that it has been taken care of. DW, I think you just recorded a show on this yourself, but what are your thoughts? We'll start with the Dan Quinn, obviously here, on the decision to move on at this point in the season.
I was a little bit surprised. We had talked in our chat that I felt like the bye week was the soonest that they would make a move. If for no other reason, the game week logistics. The head coach is responsible for preparing the team for the next game, getting them ready for that opponent, the logistics of the travel, in which case they're going up to Minnesota to play the Vikings. So there were reasons from just doing mid-season moves like this are usually very difficult. That's why bye week is usually a good time for that, because you can prepare the next guy, give him time to get used to his role. And at this point, though, 0-5, no team in NFL history has started 0-5 and made the playoffs.
Right.
So the season is over. Unless the Falcons win 11 straight and I don't think any of us would place a $5 bet on them winning 11 straight at this point, no matter what the Vegas odds are. So it makes sense. And I think, honestly, if you want to do an evaluation of the roster, it's impossible to do that when you have the same guy coaching these players that sort of drove them into the ground. And right now, I think there are serious concerns about some of the players that we thought were going to be, longtime stalwarts in this on this roster, like Deion Jones. He's had a terrible season. Honestly, I think you could say Foye has outplayed him. When he's been in the game. You look at the corners. Obviously, everyone thinks about Isaiah Oliver, but Sheffield was getting burned alive as well in that game. Ricardo Allen, Keanu Neal have not been themselves, even when they have been playing. So, top to bottom, you can't really do a thorough sort of investigation of where the roster's at if you have the same guy coaching them that led them to 0-5. So at least now you have shaken it up. And you can start to critically look at these guys in the last 11 games and figure out, who is going to, turn it back on, who is not. And, you're going to give the next GM, the next head coach, a little bit of a head start for the job that they're going to have to do.
Yeah, I agree with that take for sure. And yeah, I mean, Blank is generally, like we said a minute ago, like Blank has generally been a patient owner. With the bye being so late this year, that kind of made it more difficult. I feel like if they had like a week 7 or a week 8 bye, Blank probably just would have waited until then just because. But with a late bye like they have, I think it's like week 12 or something like that, they could be 0-12 at that point. The fan base would probably be like outside Flowery Branch, protest style with pitchforks demanding, to release the monster or whatever, like Frankenstein style. So I don't think he actually wants that sort of PR. So the move was a good one. And it's, it's always difficult to move on from a head coach that is so well liked by the players and, the media, for example. Like, I mean, I never interviewed Dan Quinn one-on-one, but I know Gina Thomas, another contributor here at the Falcoholic. She had many opportunities to do so and was always just really impressed with Dan Quinn as a person. And he always treated, her and the media right. And there's a lot of stories, on Twitter about that. The players still go to bat for him. I know someone in the chat brought up, Keanu Neal's tweet last night and what does that mean? And we don't know. Like it's an extremely vague tweet. But he's upset. And on the Keanu note, keep in mind that Neal knew Dan Quinn before he was even drafted here. Like He knew him from his days at Florida. Those two have a long relationship. It's possible that Neal and Quinn maybe have one of the strongest relationships of any players on the team. So it's not surprising that Neal was upset. But on the other hand, it doesn't matter how nice you are and how good of a person you are and how nice you are to the media if you're 0-5 and you've coming off 2 straight losing seasons. And that's the NFL for you. It's a harsh business, and you got to win games. You got to produce, or you're out the door. And it's not just players; it's coaches too. But you're right on that note about the players as well. Like Deion Jones has been super disappointing, and he's making all that money. That makes him a potential casualty. We've already briefly touched on the possibility of a quarterback coming in if the Falcons have a top 5 pick and all these things. So there's this is basically an open book now. Like, we don't know what to expect from this team going forward. We know Arthur Blank's been very supportive of his stars in the past, but is this a catalyst for Arthur Blank possibly taking a step or two back and letting this new regime basically control things and make the decisions they need to make? I don't know. It could be. But, I mean, this is a major change, and the other major change, perhaps the even more major one, is that General Manager Thomas Dimitroff is now gone. He's been with the team since 2008. So that is very much a huge changing of the guard there. Did they announce who was going to replace him this year? I think it was Rutson Webster.
Well, McKay,
as like McKay
taking over pretty much everything, personnel as of now.
Yeah,
and he's bringing in Webster as kind of sort of like a assistant.
Yeah,
At this point, so who knows?
Right. Yeah, and that's just a temporary thing, and there's not much. I mean, there's not much you can do about it in season, but.
I hope so, because Rustin Webster does not have a good track record.
No, I don't think that's their hire for GM.
No,
fans would not tolerate Rich McKay and Rutson Webster as their GM.
I wouldn't do that.
I don't think any head coaches would want that either. But so DW, I'll let you take the first crack at Dimitroff. This is the more surprising of the two firings, particularly mid-season. What are your thoughts on the decision to move on from him after 5 weeks?
I find it funny that in all the talk of Dan Quinn, everyone has this caveat. They're like, oh, he's a great man. He's, one of the nicest people you'll meet. People love him. And then when people talk about Dimitroff, there's like crickets in that regard.
Dimitroff, yeah.
He got fired. And let me just say this. We've heard lots of stories about Dimitroff. We know some of them to be 100% true that we can't share here. We can't share publicly. But needless to say, I'm not going to miss the guy.
Yeah.
I will say this. Undoubtedly, he was the most successful GM in the Falcons franchise history. He drafted arguably 2 potential Hall of Fame players in Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. And anytime you draft a franchise quarterback, you have already done what half the teams in the league just seemingly can't do on a consistent basis.
Right.
And you will get a lot of grace and you'll get a lot of forgiveness for other misses if you get it right with the QB. And I think that is what happened. And certainly during the Smitty years, he got Ryan right, he got Julio right, and he got a lot wrong. Mm-hmm. The irony is, under Dan Quinn, I think his draft classes have actually been substantially better. I think he's grabbed better talent across that time frame. I don't know that it still makes him a great GM, but I think he's a good GM for what he has done. But unfortunately, I think they became a package deal. Mm-hmm. And I did not see a scenario where Quinn was going to be let go and Dimitroff would be able to stay for his 3rd head coach. That never happens. Yeah. It's actually somewhat rare for a GM to survive to a 2nd head coach. Yeah. But I just didn't see it happening to a 3rd one. And, that's ultimately, I think we talked about this on the podcast with Dave Choate, the editor at the Falcoholic, and he brought up a fantastic point. I think the big condemnation for Dimitroff is in his 12 years, he never adequately fixed both of the lines, the offensive line, which maybe now is finally starting to come together after 12 years. Yeah. But more importantly, the defensive line. Right now we have literally one player that's worth his salt in Grady Jarrett. And after a ton of free agents and draft picks, we are still begging for some sort of pass rush on this team. And I think that is ultimately what will condemn him. And I think that's what they're going to look for in the next GM, someone who can finally fix the trenches.
Yeah. That to me was the biggest weakness of his and free agent busts, but he was not great as a free agency GM. That was probably his weakest point overall, but he also was very bad at finding pass rushers. He just simply couldn't do it. And you give someone credit for finding a great player in the 5th round, but you also temper that with the knowledge that if he knew that Grady Jarrett was Grady Jarrett, he would not have waited to take him until the 5th round. Okay, so everyone was, oh, you found this draft steal. If you'd known how good he was, he wouldn't have been taken at that spot. You would have taken him in like the 4th or the 3rd. So let's just calm down there with that. But it was a good pick, to be fair. And just edge rushers, it's a barren wasteland for TD. He can't even sign them. He just doesn't know what a good edge rusher is. We might have another disastrous signing here with Dante Fowler, who has just been awful. And early on, it was injury. He was not on the injury report this week, so there's no excuse for that performance against I don't even remember who they played. The Panthers. Such a forgettable game. I don't even remember what was. Yeah, but It was time. It was past time for Dimitroff, and DW basically summed it up. No tears are being shed about Dimitroff's firing by the players or media, because he had a reputation that he earned among the media, especially among those of us at the Falcoholic. And I think I speak for all of us when I say that we're not really sad to see him gone. Obviously, we hope that he finds professional success elsewhere, and I'm sure he will get an opportunity. Like we said, he's an above average GM. He'll have plenty of suitors, but just the whole culture needed to be cleaned out. So if they kept Dimitroff, it was just going to be the same, and Yeah, that's I'm basically 100% with you there. Eric, your thoughts on the team moving on from Dimitroff?
I didn't believe it was a surprise at all. Like DW pointed out, we actually asked this question last week. Has anyone ever seen a GM, take on 3 different head coaches in succession? And I knew no one brought it up. No one said that they've ever seen anything like that before. So I couldn't. The odds of him staying, was pretty minimal to me. And I have to be honest with you. As long as he's been there, which is 12 seasons, he's pretty much living off of Matt and Julio.
Yeah.
If we're being honest, he's really living off that, because there's no in between really with him. Either he hit on some picks, or he whiffed badly to the point to where the bat flew out of his hands. And
yeah.
It's just, from, going back, even Sam Baker, guys like that, Desmond Southward, Lamar Holmes, Pariah Jerry. It was bad. And I don't think he honestly deserved some of the credit that he actually received, because it took a rookie head coach to come in for his draft classes to get better. That shouldn't be the case. Why did you get better at drafting because of a rookie head coach coming in, and he pretty much boosted your perception from others outside of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I felt like he needed to go as well.
Yeah.
And honestly, for over a decade, like they really haven't had a reliable defensive line.
Yeah.
And that is a real problem. I mean, I know teams can go maybe 3-4 years to get a defensive line together, get the guys developed until we actually starting to see something. But my God, like it's literally been his entire tenure here that they have not had a reliable pass rush.
Right.
And that is unheard of. So him departing was another move that needed to happen. I didn't care when. He just needed to go.
Yeah. Yeah. The timing, maybe a little bit surprising, but yeah, I mean, we talked about it on, I think, last week's Falcoholic Live too, which was the fact that the Falcons weren't going to be able to lure in a quality coaching candidate with Dimitroff as a lame duck, potentially GM, hanging over that guy. Like,
right.
It just wouldn't have made any sense. I certainly wouldn't have wanted to come in knowing that the GM could be fired, either mid-season or the next year, and then I'll have to deal with another GM that may or may not want me around. Like, it just, the mechanics of it from that angle didn't make sense, and just that I don't think, and if you remember last year, like the rumors were actually that Dimitroff was closer to being fired than Dan Quinn, and it was actually Dan Quinn that stepped in and kept blank from firing Dimitroff because he wanted to continue working with him. So that was always interesting to me. But he didn't have the rope, I think, that Dan Quinn did, the leeway, because of his abrasive personality. So it's just interesting that I think the dichotomy of, like, Dan Quinn, great person that people like, but pretty mediocre to bad football coach, and the owner wanted to keep him as long as possible, whereas Dimitroff was like above average GM, actually, like in what he's asked to do, but personality wise very abrasive and people just dislike him. So he's actually, and it's just funny how that difference has played out.
I wouldn't even say above average.
He's above average.
No, I'm not giving him that credit, guys.
Okay, that's fine. I think he's above average at least.
I think his whiffs were bad enough that it actually set the team back for a while in certain spots.
Certainly.
And it was like we just pointed out. Why do you need 12 seasons to put a pass rush together?
Yeah.
Like, that's you. How can you get around that? You're supposed to be the talent evaluator, and you have a decade plus of the same results on the defensive side of the ball. How many times have the Falcons had during Dimitroff's tenure, whether he was with Smith or Quinn, how many times have they had some of the worst defenses in the league.
I mean,
who's
all
the
the
common
time.
denominator and all that? The common denominator is Thomas Dimitroff. He's been here for 12 years.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't think he was, like I said, he hit on Julio, great. He nailed Matt Ryan, awesome. But I honestly think he skated by with that.
Yeah.
I mean, Beasley was bad. Tack is looking bad. Dante Fowler's looking bad.
Dante Fowler, my God, yeah, that he probably got fired just for that. Like, you pay $16 million of my money to a premier quote unquote pass rusher.
Jamon Brown, that was bad.
Well, that was really bad. Yeah,
he's really hurt the team in my opinion.
Yeah,
and I feel like he was living off the pass.
He was certainly. Yeah. All right. Well, the other question, the other thing before we'll talk about where they go from here in terms of some candidates that you guys like for both guys. But Raheem Morris is the interim head coach. DW, is that surprising to you? Do you like the decision? Did you have someone else in mind? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
It makes sense. You know, he's been a head coach before. They have someone else that can step in Jeff Ulbrich to take over the defensive play calling, which he was doing already. Raheem was only calling up apparently third down plays, which honestly, a two-headed monster at a coordinator position is just like I've never understood that.
Yeah,
anyway.
It's like rotating on the offensive line, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's you can suck half the time, or you can suck all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those moves that it's not going to make a difference. Raheem is not going to suddenly turn this into an 11-win team. The issues with this team are in the roster. It's in the culture, it's in the entire coaching staff. I don't expect that, if they win more than 4 games, I'll be shocked. That said, I do like Raheem. I think that this will serve as an audition for him for other teams. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I would have preferred that Dirk Cutter take over, if only for the reason that it would take him away from play calling at least.
You assume.
I mean, yeah, oh my God, maybe it gets even worse.
Yeah.
Running on every single down, God forbid. But yeah, I think Raheem makes sense, especially with his past experience. And at this point, they could have put, a 15-year-old high schooler in charge, and it would have been an improvement of what Dan Quinn was doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least the high school, like if we could just plug in Ask Madden, I think we might have had an improvement over what was being called on a down-to-down basis here. But yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Morris was the obvious choice. I think basically, I think he was the odds-on favorite. There was some buzz about Jeff Ulbrich because apparently the COVID guidelines suggested that maybe he would have been the temporary head coach if Quinn was, had been put on the COVID list. But Morris definitely has more experience. He was a head coach, I think, for 3 seasons with the Bucs. So he's used to it. He's been in that role before. On such short notice, it makes sense to kind of hand the team over to someone who's been in that role before. But yeah, I agree with what DW said. This is not going to produce meaningful change. I mean, sometimes like the head coaching change can inspire the team and spark things up a little bit. But to me, that's like winning like 5 of the next 11 games or something like that. Like instead of going 3-13, maybe we get to 5-11 or something. But
because from the press clippings that we've seen recently, apparently there's been somewhat of a mixed bag since 2017 as far as player support for Dan Quinn. So now you kind of wonder, like, okay, Keanu's coming out publicly saying these things, Matt Ryan's publicly saying these things, Caleb McGarry's publicly saying these things, but the past 3 years, how many players really backed him? Now I'm starting to question that because it may just be a few of the top guys at the top of the roster, but pretty much a large portion of the roster is like, okay, whatever, they need to move on. I get the players supporting him. I completely understand it. It's natural. A lot of players are going to do that. I mean, he drafted pretty much most of the team.
Right.
I completely understand it. But what do you expect, man? You guys started 1-7 last year and 0-5 this year. Like, what do you think that the support from the fans is still supposed to be at an all-time high? Still supposed to be 100%? You guys are winless. Mm-hmm. I think these guys are forgetting the fact that this is a business at the end of the day. You can't sit here and make friends. Making friends doesn't win Super Bowls.
No. No, it's nice, if you can make friends and win Super Bowls. But, like, yeah, you can't expect, like, I don't know exactly what Neil's trying to say with that tweet, but, I mean,
that's his foreign motion. He's frustrated.
Yeah, it's like, but that's like most fans don't know, like, and that's the thing. Like, I don't think anyone is claim. I mean, maybe just fans go out and think they know everything about the NFL. I mean, I like to think we as analysts know a little bit more. We've had the ability to talk with former player like Keenan Forney on here, and he could give us his insight into what's going on. So I feel like we're pretty informed as to what goes on in these sorts of situations, and it's just like you can think whatever you want to think as a player inside the team, and maybe you think like, oh, like, everything's fine. We shouldn't have fired Dan Quinn, but like you're 0-5, like you can't. Everything's not fine. It doesn't matter what way you slice it. So, I mean, I guess maybe he's arguing like that the players suck and they're the reason that they're losing. Which seems a little self-defeating to me. I probably wouldn't take that tack if I were him, considering he's in a contract year, but,
If they went 0-16, what did Keanu want to do? Just run it back next year?
Run it back, baby. Right. Look, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me 3 or more times, shame on me.
You guys are not playing well. Hell, if you guys are upset that he's fired, why don't you play better?
Right, like that's the other part of it, right? Like if you didn't want him to get fired, maybe win a game. If you'd won one game, I guarantee he would have lasted till the bye. One win would have gotten him through to the bye week. So,
yep.
But 0 wins, and going back to like the 90s for the last time you were this bad, that has a
1997.
Yeah, that has a way of helping changes happen very, very quickly. All right, well, I know Eric and I have given our thoughts on this, but we haven't heard from you too much, DW, since, I mean, you probably talked about it on your own pod, but in terms of head coaches, who are some guys that you really like at this point?
Oh, well, I mean, everyone's talked about Eric Bieniemy. I think he's got to be one of the front runners. The question for him is, looking at the other vacancies that are going to be there. Obviously, Houston has their quarterback situation settled with Deshaun Watson. A lot of people are pointing to that, but they're missing – first and second round pick, which would make it hard to begin a rebuild process there. Yeah. I think you come to Atlanta, you've got a little bit more stability on the offensive line. You can ride out a former MVP QB for, a couple years if you want to draft a QB and just sit them on the bench to learn. So I think there's good reasons to think he may be interested in Atlanta. I think, another name is, what's his, Sayball, the
Brian Daboll
coordinator for the Bills.
Yeah,
Brian
yeah.
Daboll. Yeah. So, he's someone that he's in his mid-40s. So, he's got a really creative offense up there in Buffalo. So he's a name I would pay attention to as well. I've heard some people mention Joe Brady, who is I believe the offensive coordinator for the Panthers. I'm not sure that I buy into that, but he's really young. I think he's in his early 30s, 31, 32.
The Wonderkind, yes.
Yeah. So those are the names I think, and honestly, I think it's got to be a offensive-minded coach at this point. We've done now 2 straight coaches that are defensive-minded and continually fielded bottom of the league defenses.
Oh yeah.
I think they need to focus on getting a good defensive coordinator. I know people in the chat were talking about Wade Phillips. I would love to see them bring in someone like him, but honestly, I think go for a really creative, relatively young offensive mind. I think that's where this franchise needs to go right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with those names. Like Bieniemy is the top one for me as well. Arthur Smith, the Titans offensive coordinator, I like his game planning a lot. I think he's another candidate that could be out there if they were to miss on someone like a Bieniemy. Brian Daboll is going to be a hot name. I know Corey has been very on the Josh McDaniels train. Given Blank's ties to the Patriots and that sort of thing, so that's not my first choice, but I'm just putting it out there as a name. And there is precedent for someone failing, going back, and then getting a second chance and doing well. Like it has happened. So I know McDaniels was not great in his original opportunity. So trust me, I know. But
I think with the way the roster is structured right now. I mean, they got a lot of money tied in to some veterans. So anyone that's thinking that it's going to be an automatic strip down and rebuild this offseason, financially, they can't do it.
Nope.
to impossible. It's going to kill the team if they get rid of a lot of these veteran stars. So that's why I feel that even though the enemy's at the top of the list, I think veteran head coaches, guys that's been the head coach before, I think they are real possibilities. Mm-hmm. And I know fans may not want to hear that. They may just want to get, a guy like Bieniemy in here or a creative young offensive mind that's going to take the keys. But this is a roster that if it's handled properly, it can win now. They can be a playoff contender in 2021 if the right guy comes in and make the necessary changes. So like I said, I feel like for the listeners that are out there, do not look away from former head coaches. Keep your eye on those two. I think that is a definite consideration.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and then we're just gonna wrap up with some GM talk. GM candidates are definitely more like hard to know. Do you have any names in mind at this point, DW, or are you still doing the research?
I think the one that's been mentioned with Bieniemy is Louis Riddick, I believe, and he does have a connection as a player. He used to play with the Falcons back in the 90s, so there is a little bit of a link there. That's the only guy I've heard, and honestly, I think, like you said, GMs are a little bit harder to nail down. I'm going to leave that up to the team to figure out, but I would be talking out my backside if I tried to come up with some names. I think it'd be a good choice there.
Right. Like I've heard, like Nick Caserio from the Patriots is a hot name. Another one that people haven't really talked about, Scott Pioli, I don't believe is a GM right now. He was here in Atlanta.
Really?
I don't. What's that?
Really?
Pioli? Well, I'm just saying he's a GM candidate. Like, I think Blank did like Pioli, and Pioli decided to step away, but I don't think it was a coincidence that the drafting seemed to be best during the years where Pioli and Dimitroff were working together. But, I'm just saying that's a name. He has a connection clearly here. He was here as like an assistant GM. And he has KC connections as well with Bieniemy potentially. So just saying, don't count that name out in this search. That's all. Did you have any other ones, Eric, that you were thinking of?
Riddick was definitely one that came off the top of my head, and he has front office experience with the Redskins and the Eagles. With those two teams, I think he was director of player personnel with both of those teams for a few years. So he's not stepping into this blind. And I mentioned it before on our show, but I attended the Scouting Academy a few years back, and he's one of the lead instructors for the Scouting Academy. And that guy knows his football.
He does, yeah. He's very knowledgeable.
He's very knowledgeable about the sport. So it's not just the name that we're throwing out there. This guy is a football whiz. I mentioned yesterday Daniel Jeremiah, another guy that has front office experience. Daniel Jeremiah was in the front office in Baltimore with the Ravens for a handful of years, so he learned under Ozzie Newsome.
Right.
So he picked up a little bit about the game. He's also another guy that is just pretty, like, when it comes to scouting players and things of that nature, this guy knows his game, man. Just listening to conversations. So those are two names that I put out there. They may not be actual, like, realistic options, but I feel those guys could be ready if they were called upon.
Yeah.
There's a couple other guys that you got to mention. I can't think of the guy's name off the top of my head right now. He's an assistant exec in Kansas City right now. It's slipping my mind. But there's a couple other names that are out there that are pretty much not actual GMs. They're more of the player personnel type or assistant GMs maybe. So keep an eye out. Keep your eyes peeled on something like that, because that type of hire is probably going to dictate the type of philosophy the team is going to be for the coming future. So keep an eye on that. And I think that may be the first hire before a head coach, if anything.
Yes.
Could be. Yeah, it definitely could be. It depends on the tack they want to take. Some teams try to bring the two in as like a package deal where they work close together. Sometimes it's the more traditional GM then head coach route. But yeah, particularly if it's someone that's not actively employed by a team right now, like a Daniel Jeremiah you brought up, Scott Pioli, those types of guys. Louis Riddick. Like those guys could theoretically be brought in before the end of the season. So
or Mike Borgonzi.
Mike Borgonzi. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Director of football operations.
Yeah, so those are definitely some good names to throw out there. Like we said, guys, obviously GM candidates a little bit more of a niche, topic when you're getting on football talk. But those are some names to keep track of. All right, well, before we wrap up here, guys, I do want to remind you, thanks to everyone for tuning in for this show. It's a little bit somber, but to me personally, it feels like kind of a weight's been lifted. So I feel good in that way, but it's always kind of a somber experience when you end an era of a team. And this was the most successful era in Falcons history. So even though it ended poorly, I'm thankful for the great years that we did have. I'm thankful for 2016 up until the very end, which we never talk about. So if you don't mind throwing a like to the video, that helps other folks on YouTube find the video. And if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. You'll get notifications for us. We will be back on Wednesday nights. That's our usual show. And we also do a post-game show after the games. But we are not done quite yet. Before we get out of here, I want to thank my guest, David Walker, also known as DW. He's at Falcoholic DW, the host of the Falcoholic podcast. DW, any closing remarks, anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, just tune in. You can find the Falcoholic podcast on iTunes, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, all the standard platforms. And we are certainly going to have tons of content talking about, we still have to cover this freaking season, obviously, the Falcoholic. So we will be talking about the games, but we'll also be talking a lot about potential candidates, like you said, for head coach and GM. So this will be a very interesting time for Falcons fans and for us at the site. We're going to have a ton of stuff to write and talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be a busy time, and then it's going to be draft season. So I'm getting warmed up there. But I'm sure Eric is as well. Eric Robinson joining us today at _Eric_Robinson. Eric, anything you want to close on? Anything you want to plug?
Yeah, just piggybacking off what DW pointed out, just visit the Falcoholic site. As soon as the news came down last night, we were kicking ideas left and right in the group chat. So we were ready to, put some things together for you guys. So be on the lookout. Take a look at the site. Like you mentioned, also, subscribe here as well. And just keep us locked in, man, because we're putting a lot of stuff together. We're going to do this because I think the fans care more about this than actual wins and losses.
Yeah, that's where we are. So it's tank time. Yeah.
So we're going to be ready. So check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, I am Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin on Twitter. Like I said, all the stuff. Follow it, subscribe. The show also has a Twitter account. It's at Falcoholic Live. I'm gonna have stuff coming out all week about head coaching candidates, GM candidates. Draft takes are gonna start up soon because this team, every year they push me closer and closer. Draft season. Now it's October. It's not even like halfway through October. We already have to start doing mock drafts. So I shall oblige. Yeah.
Do not tell me it's too early for a mock draft.
It's never too early, but
they're winless.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's time.
Or losing to the next team, okay?
Right, yeah. Talk about, all the different permutations. I can't phrase, I'm running out of adjectives for, the way they lose games. It's like, this is a disappointing loss. It's a crushing loss. It's a disastrous loss. Meltdown. Yeah, I'm starting to run low. I'm gonna have to whip out the thesaurus here pretty soon to get me through the rest of the season. But thank you guys for tuning in. We all appreciate you. Like I said, Wednesday night we will have our normal show at 8:10 p.m. Eastern. We'll be breaking this down in a little more detail, maybe with some more details from the team about what to expect going forward. Until then, guys, we appreciate you. We will see you around on the Twitters. Enjoy the rest of this lovely Monday. I don't know. It's kind of cloudy here. Depending on where you are, it might be lovely. But enjoy it. We will see you on Wednesday.